Hello, everyone. Good to see you. I'm just
Hello, Mynoo.
hello.
Mhm.
It's one of those um, interesting days in the sense that for we have different people hosting different weeks in a month, and so today is week 2 for us in May because for us our sessions happen on Friday morning. So last week was week 1, whereas for the US, last week was the last week of the month, and this week is week 1. So we won't have a host today. We are just going to be together, and I will kickstart this portal of transmutation of fear. First, when I was preparing for our session and I got this session, we are going to start the cycle we're going to start the cycle of fear. And I thought, what is that? How can that be a portal of the age of brilliance? And it is actually a portal of transmutation of fear. And that's what we are going to be working with. So, as I said in my note, fear was never the enemy, you know? And what if what you fear is not even real? Last time we opened the portal of regenerative action choices. And now we are entering one of the deepest distortion interrupting the brilliance of us as humans, which is fear. Fear, in its simplest form, is an acronym of false expectations appearing real. So, in this transmission, what we're doing is we are entering the hidden architecture of fear. And from within that, we are unlocking 12 powerful transmutations, not to cope, not to survive, but to transmute this such that distortions dissolve, energy returns, momentum restores itself, and brilliance resurfaces. It's a very unusual and quite a rare portal that we are embarking on the journey to open today. It's a powerful opening. So, I was very, very aware that this is not necessarily going to call to most people. But if you're feeling the call, there is a reason. And I'm delighted that you're here. So let's go in. Let's go into it. First thing to remember is this session is not about becoming fearless. Fear was never the enemy. Fear was the messenger. And as a messenger, it was distorted by false expectations appearing real. Hence, the acronym of FEAR. So, when the unreal is perceived as real, what happens to us humans is we start shrinking. We start shrinking our magnificence. And as we shrink our magnificence, we bring in ways in which we delay. And that delay sometimes distorts. And that distortion disconnects us. And it disconnects us, disappearing from our own brilliance. Fear is not just emotional, it is energetic, it is biological, it is relational. It alters perception. It is so powerful that it even bends time. That which we have distorted the false expectation that we've distorted and to become real actually distorts time. And in its distortion, it starts to cloud clarity. And that interrupts regenerative action. And we saw the power of regenerative action choices in the 3 sessions that we did on that last time around. The thing that I got as I was preparing for this transmission is, despite everything that I have said so far about fear, yet inside fear lies one of the greatest portals to miracles. And remember, in my world, a miracle is when something beautiful occurs that makes your heart sing. And why is so? Why is that there lies one of the greatest portals to miracles? Because the moment false expectations collapse, truth rises. And truth liberates energy. And what this transmission, and however long it takes for us to get through this, will take that time. This transmission is leveling the playing field around fear. Not by suppressing it, not by escaping it, and not by pretending it does not exist, but by transmuting it. So, I'll talk about the 12 transmutations, but there is really only one pathway that enables transmutation to occur. And it is the pathway of acknowledgement. Many of you who know me for a while have heard me. You've heard me say acknowledgement is one of the most powerful tools that we have at our disposal. So let's take fear. False expectations appearing real. You begin by, if you have that feeling of fear, you will know how it feels like. It really does make itself known. There's no hiding from it. And it really does. If you attempt to ignore it, it stops you in your tracks. And that stop could be a mental distress, or physical distress, or an emotional breakdown, or a major social dynamic collapse. So when you know that there is that feeling of fear that is building up, you pause and make a conscious choice of using the acknowledgement pathway. And you begin by acknowledging all of the false expectations. And I'll share my own example because I have had those moments of fear, in February this year. So you start by acknowledging the false expectations. Acknowledge, 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 acknowledge. When you feel like you already have acknowledged, then go ahead and acknowledge some more. You look at what did it make you believe? And when I say acknowledge, there is greater power in dissolving this false expectations and getting into reality, which kickstarts the transmutation process if you actually write it down. So I have lots of these type of little notebooks. They're not that many pages, just tiny little ones. And I use it for these sort of exercises from time to time. So the first step is, let's just take the fear as an acronym, false expectations appearing real. Acknowledge the false expectations. Remember, Expectation by itself is not real, doesn't exist right now. It's something that you expect. So, what I've started doing is I just do a very powerful and a very regular expectation acknowledgement. It's all expectations in my world are false expectations because they're not real. You have a whole load of expectations. And if you were to look at what is real, is what you take on as your intention. So your intention is real. Everything else is a false expectation. You will do it in your own way and you will evolve it and you will expand your own understanding of what I'm talking about. But when it comes to fear, begin with the false expectations. What did those false expectations make you believe? Acknowledge those. And what did these expectations and these beliefs make you fearful about? Acknowledge those. How long have you carried this with you? You're not judging, you're not attempting to fix anything. All you're engaged in is simply acknowledging. How long have you carried it? How has it shaped your choices? Acknowledge that. How has it impacted your body? You know, acknowledge that. What impact did it have on your business, on your relationships, on your identity, on your presence? And just ask yourself, is there anything else that is left to acknowledge? And when nothing comes through, acknowledge that all of this that you've written down is not real. Keep going again and again and again. What I found for myself, I'll talk about that in a moment. Keep going again and again and again until there is nothing left to defend, nothing left to resist, nothing left to perform. Only truth, only presence, only unconditional acceptance of all that is. And it is from this sacred ground that miracles begin. Because when resistance dissolves, regeneration starts. When distortion dissolves, brilliance returns. And it is at this moment where fear becomes freedom. So let's take a couple of examples, right? I'll share one with first one I'll share is about myself. Now, I've known about fear as false expectations appearing real. I've known about the acknowledgement process for a while, and I have applied it to this. The real situation that I was faced with, and quite shockingly surprised that I was still holding fear as false expectations appearing real in such a way that it took some effort for me to go through this process. Acknowledgement was a way in which I was handling it, and yet this granular breaking down of different layers of acknowledgement around fear became real to me when fear became up close and personal and real to me. The fear was, there I was, 27th of February, left to India for a meeting for a couple of days. And my son left for Chiang Mai because we had decided to move there for a week so that he could finalize the house and finalize the school and all of that. 28th of February, the missiles started, um, got engaged and started landing in Dubai. And then suddenly, what seemed like 2 days, 3 days, or a week, the first week was all about, wow, aren't we lucky that we made the decision to move? Wow, aren't we lucky that my daughter-in-law and grandsons, moved from the 45 fifth floor to a second floor Airbnb. So there was lots and lots to be grateful for the first week. And then it continued. There was no sign of it stopping. And I could see from a tuning in perspective that whilst there was some expectations in certain quarters that this was going to be a couple of weeks, it wasn't. And my role in my own spiritual state was not to do anything about how it's going to play out, only to connect with the divine feminine and anchor the divine feminine energetically into the mix of all of the various decisions that are going to be playing out over the next several months. That was fine. And yet, in my human form, I had people very, very dear to me that were there. And, airports were closed. And there was literally, I couldn't go in and I couldn't go out. And even though I looked at flying into Oman and got my usual driver, and my reconnected with my ex-brother-in-law too, since he lives in Oman, so that I could land there and take a car and go pick my family and bring them back. It's an 8-hour drive. But there were many others who were thinking this way, so it wasn't an 8-hour drive. It could have been anything from 12 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours. So there was false expectations appearing real, starting to build up. Every day, several times a day, I would do the acknowledgement exercise. Because what I saw was, even though I had it all perfectly planned, and I could go in, when I shared this with my daughter-in-law, she said to me, "There's lots of stuff on social media. I want you to know, if I was on the 45th floor, I would say go do it. I'm not. I'm on the second floor. So if something happens, I need to climb down and go to a safe place, then that's what I can do. It's feasible with 2 kids. Right now, inside, everything is fine. You know, ask me what's going on on the ground. And if you were to come, I'm not going to risk taking our 2 boys, in this open environment in a car for 8 hours, 16 hours, when it is not necessary right now." So she was literally in the now. Despite all of the mayhem playing up in the skies, I saw that she was operating in the now and taking the next step next in the now. I was gripped by fear because I was having these false expectations appearing real. I don't even want to go into that because I've literally really dissolved all of that completely. And that's when I just decided that, okay, I'm going to operate in the now. Now is the moment, not now as in today, because so much was happening. Each day was so long, felt so long. And remember, I lived there, so I'm part of resident groups and stuff. So every time there is any notification, it comes to me as much as it comes to all other residents of Dubai. So to be in that place, I used the acknowledgement path and I simply kept going. I realized that is when I reconnected to all expectations are false expectations because there is no reality in any expectations. So, as many of you know, I talk about my method of managing my time is a time segmentation method where I create segments of my time and I have 10 minutes in between segments, and no segment is more than 30 minutes long. And then when I'm in the segment, I'm true to the segment. That's all that I'm doing. Not only did I create a fear segment, which was initially it was a dissolving of fear, and then it became a transmutation of fear. So I had a 30-minute segment on fear every single day, which was totally focused on that. And the 10-minute in between, I would use, a few minutes of that to just do a checkup within my body and acknowledge any of the expectations that might have surfaced. It wasn't only to do with Dubai, any expectation whatsoever. Because remember, whatever you have in your field becomes an vibrational energy signature that magnetizes more to it. So I was really clearing that out. And that was called for the energetic work that I was doing at a global level. I mean, it took me 3 weeks to actually see that switch occur from fear to freedom. Doesn't mean that false expectation didn't creep up every time there was some news or the other. We also had a very dear friend and my son's business partner. And Arun, you're here. Apurv, you've met. Apurv and his girlfriend were stuck in Bahrain. And as they were checking in, half of their hotel gets destroyed with a missile attack. And at that point, their passport and IDs were with the registration desk, and all hell broke loose. So they had no passport, no ID cards. So there was like really quite significant stuff that was occurring. So I very diligently implemented my 30-minute time segments for all of the things that I was working on and had a dedicated 30-minute time segment. I only had one 30-minute time segment on fear, transmutation of fear. But the 10 minutes in between the time segments, I just kept using acknowledgement. And that enabled that switch to take place. It also enabled me to stay on path, to continue the transmutations. And now, as I do this, I had no idea that transmutation of fear was one of the portals of the Age of Brilliance. I had no idea the work that I had done during that time was using many of these transmutation pathways that I will be sharing in a moment. I know that there's a question that Ashaji has raised, so let me just check on that and respond to it. Acknowledgement example to understand how to do this. I just tell myself that, oh God, I said this and I'm afraid of the consequences. Please explain. So, example of acknowledgement really is I'm not saying anything to anybody other than I'm acknowledging. So here, what I was acknowledging was I was acknowledging that I had a, a number of expectations of what could go wrong. Nothing more than that. I acknowledged that I had a number of expectations of what could go wrong. And they are not real. I am acknowledging that by me having those perceived expectations, I was anchoring the vibration of those in reality. I acknowledged that whilst I have done so much of this work, spiritual work, I was challenged in being only in the moment. I was acknowledging that my daughter-in-law and how she was handling the two kids and her friends and us was commendable. And I was acknowledged that I was worrying unnecessarily, and that worry was being launched like an emotional missile into the field of my loved ones. I was acknowledging that I was very frustrated that my sister was refusing to move from the 41st floor to the second floor, which she could, and totally refusing to even consider moving out of Dubai and continuing to go to her work every single day. I was acknowledging that I had developed a number of judgments around that about her. I was also acknowledging her majestic magnificence of staying centered. She's the head of her organization. And she kept saying, look, everybody's coming to work. And if I don't, you know, what message am I giving out? I'm not running away. I've had a very fulfilling life. And whatever pans out, pans out. So I was acknowledging her presidential way in which she was handling all of this. I was acknowledging that part of me would judge her for as being delusional, and a part of me would admire her for her resolve and resilience. I was acknowledging that this body of work of, 10 commandments of the new earth, uncertainty, certain, take nothing for granted. I was acknowledging that this is a stark example of how things could pan out. I was acknowledging that our goods, whilst they were in with the shipping company, they had not left Dubai. And whatever would pan out, we will get them at some point, but not anytime soon. I was acknowledging that I was sad that my paintings and my crystals and some very, very special things were in that container that may or may not make it at that point in time. And it was just a false expectation because the reality was everything was in a container in a warehouse in Dubai. It wasn't on some ship. It wasn't in a port, So does that help? I mean, it's precise, very, very precise. Ashaji, does that help answer your question? You'll need to unmute in case you're talking.
No, it doesn't answer my question. Can I tell you?
Yeah?
For example, if somebody is not talking with me, even if I try to talk and communicate, and that person doesn't respond anything, I'm just afraid because that was the person whom I had loved the most, and
Yeah.
now that person is not ready to look at me also.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and at this stage of my life, I definitely need some support. And that when you don't get that support, you are always in fear. What will happen?
Yes.
How
Yes,
to
I understand. Yes. So the fact is this person that you love so much is not talking to you. Acknowledge that. Acknowledge that it makes you fearful about not having the support that you look for at this point in your life. Acknowledge that it really deeply saddens you. Acknowledge that it creates a feeling of uncertainty. Acknowledge how it feels in your body. You're not doing any, don't make it mean anything, and also acknowledge the meaning that you're attributing to it. Acknowledge that the consequences of this person not speaking to you are expectations that are not real. Because what happens is when we get stuck in expectations, expectation land is also very buoyant meaning land. When those expectations are not fulfilled, and especially when an expectation is arising from unsaid communication, then it starts to multiply in terms of more and more meaning that you give to the consequences, to why, to how can this happen, all that stuff, and acknowledge all of that, it is doing all of that. Know that acknowledgement is really there to flush your system out. It is not a fix. It is literally a clearing and cleaning out. Until you get to, and when I acknowledge my frustration with my sister, I also acknowledged her majestic magnificence to hold the realm of miracles. She said to me, "You always say miracles are something beautiful that occurs that makes your heart sing. My heart is beating. That is the song of the heart. You've taught me that." So every day I wake up in the morning and I look at everything that is going on that's making my heart sing. So I acknowledged her for staying in that realm, whilst also acknowledging that she's not understanding the depth of concern that everybody else in the family has for her. Because all members of the family, they realize that she's not going to respond, so they would be talking to me about, you tell her this and you tell her that and stuff. So I acknowledged all sides. So Ashati, you will also acknowledge where you are supported. And the biggest support that you have, and everyone, all of us have, and you have a lot of it, is the support of the divine and many descended divine masters. I have never met anyone who has close connection and relationship with so many phenomenal descended masters as you have. You're more supported than anyone is. Acknowledge that, and acknowledge that when this happens, when this person doesn't speak to you, you forget about all of that. Acknowledge that. That's why I say keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going until you are so filled with the acknowledgements of the positives that start to emerge more and more and more. And you're able to declare unconditional acceptance of all that is. Acknowledge how it feels in your body. Acknowledge, the impact it is having on your well-being. You're just acknowledging factually your experiences and your journey as you are experiencing it, making false expectations appear real. That's all you're doing here. This is not gratitude. This is not, thanking God or anything like that. You can acknowledge the presence of God in this, should you wish to. But you will find when you finally get to it, it will happen well before you finally get to unconditional acceptance of all that is. So Ashaji, will you have a go with this?
Yes, I understand now. I'll experiment. I have to do actually experiment on it. And I'll
Yes.
come back to you.
Yeah, and I will send you the extract of this particular section that I have just covered in words.
Yeah,
Okay, so
please.
you can actually work through the questions.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Thank you.
thank you for asking that question. It allowed me to clarify it at greater depth.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So let's go through the transmutations. The first transmutation. The first transmutation is focus. Focus. Focus is the return of energy to what is real. Fear, as false expectations appearing real, scatters. Focus gathers. Now, when you are operating from false expectations appearing real, and you're very focused on the reality of those false expectations, your focus is still there and it is gathering around that. And then fear starts to create 1,000 imaginary futures that don't exist. When you have completed the acknowledgement process, you're in a space where you are clear. Now, when you focus, it returns you to the moment where your power actually exists. There is no past, there is no future, there is only what is. Focus is not a tunnel vision. Focus is a coherent attention. Coherent attention that you can direct. But when you are gripped by false expectations appearing real that are rapidly multiplying these thousands of imaginary futures, you're feeding distortion. Once you have done so, the acknowledgement process is the first step, and do not compromise on it. Do not assume it's all done. It took me 3 weeks to bring about that transmutation in myself. And I have to say, I was in India for 3 days, for my youngest sister's celebration. And my middle sister from Dubai was there also, Biba. And it was phenomenal what was going on with my sister and how she has evolved and grown over the last year. And to see such love and reverence from people that she has served was phenomenal to be in that energy. And yet, the most exciting thing for me, the most exciting thing that was making my heart sing moment by moment, was seeing my middle sister. And 3 days later, she left for Dubai and I left for Chiang Mai. And so it was. So I realized that was the final dissolving of the false expectation element. So coming back to focus, focus returns you to the moment where your power actually exists. You're not pulled by the past or destabilized by an uncertain future. You're here and now. Focus, like I said, it is a coherent attention, and it has the ability to stop feeding distortion. So distortions disappear. When you're in the realm of false expectations appearing real, they become so real, distortions disappear even there. And that's where you go into the delusion of all of the things that can go wrong have already gone wrong. Acknowledge, 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 get into a clearing, and you start acknowledging some magical stuff that is occurring in the moment. You stop feeding distortion, you focus. Why is it important? Because when what you focus on, you energize. Humans accidentally regenerate fear by repeatedly rehearsing catastrophe. And we do it sometimes unbeknown to us. There is no catastrophe. Even though the missiles were going on, my close ones who were fueling this fear were actually in a safe place. So humans, because this is an unbeknown to us accidental regeneration of fear by by rehearsing catastrophe repeatedly, the nervous system cannot always distinguish between reality and the imagined repetition. And this is why false expectations appearing real become embodied. They become embodied realities. Focus, once you have completed the acknowledgement process or inner clearing, interrupts that loop. That's what happens. That's why it's a transmutation. Who does it impact? It impacts leaders overwhelmed by possibilities, good or bad. Focus really releases the overwhelm because distortions disappear. It impacts a parent fearing the future for whatever reason, like Ashaji, you shared, a founder frozen by uncertainty, a human replaying scenarios that have not happened. It is for those that exhausted by carrying futures that do not exist. I've already talked a lot about how you can apply focus by acknowledging, the detailed way in which I suggested. You can acknowledge. Sometimes you may not have the time to acknowledge all of the details. There are times that all you can do is declare, I notice the expectations, I notice the fear, I notice what I made it mean, I notice the impact it has had. In amidst all of this, I return to fact, not fantasy, not projection, not assumption, fact. And from fact, focus. Focus on what is. Where focus returns, fear loses its food, its essential nourishment. And you are in the now. In the moment, all that exists is miracles, whatever may be going on. In the moment, all that exists is miracles, that which is making your heart sing. And whilst doing planetary work energetically, I've also been very up close and personal with specific people in certain regions of the world, deeply impacted by what's going on, directly, up close and personal. Like we have some friends who have a Michelin restaurant in Dubai, and but their family is from Lebanon. And when all of this started happening in Dubai, they actually felt that they would much rather be with family if they are to experience this kind of this kind of situation. So they went to Lebanon. They live in quite a closed community. There are Christians that are living there. They live in quite a closed community. So even though that lot of war situations were happening in Lebanon and major cities, it wasn't even close to their area. So it was pretty amazing to talk to them and feel how they had felt like they had landed, and whatever occurs will occur. They're here with their family and friends. And everything was fine until literally it was like 150 meters away, a missile landed. At this point, they decided to move to their residence up in the mountains. And it was a journey through treacherous parts. And then once they would be in the mountains, they would be in the mountains. There's nothing really that goes there. It's not a focus of any attention of anybody at all. And they actually have quite a special, luxurious resort that is running there. And many wealthy Lebanese people had already moved up there. But for them, their family and friends were really close, so they decided to be here. Many of their family and friends did not want to move up to the mountain with them. So there I was with this couple and their young boy, 8-year-old boy, and guiding them to be in the moment by moment. And it literally was take the next step next, until they got to the mountain. And of course, it was extremely worrying for them to be there. It was like, we are in Lebanon, we are here, and some of our closest people are not here with us. They are in the area that was safe up to this point in time is not safe anymore. Again, false expectations appearing real. They kept coming into the center in the moment. And then their parents decided to move up to the mountain. And really their inner ecosystem is now together in the mountain. That occurred because I did that huge acknowledgement piece with them first, and then I was able to just have them focus on taking the next step next, making choices and decisions, standing in the moment. Because the restaurant in Dubai is continuing to run. All the profits have disappeared, but it's still continuing to run. And he needed to be there. He's got 3 Michelin restaurants, one in Dubai, one in Lebanon, and one in London. And he was not going to leave his family or travel anywhere. And of course, lots of expectations of all of the mayhem that can occur because he's not traveling were also building up, and that would only have exacerbated the situation. So this transmutation of fear process, using focus, always begin with acknowledgement, using focus, is what they are working with. They are now quite adept at working on this by themselves, and they're doing it. The second transmutation is freshness. Freshness. What is freshness? Freshness is the ending of psychological repetition. Fear makes people relive realities that they have imagined, which actually are old. Remember, only the moment is the moment of now, and there's a new now. So becoming attached to where you are now, you're becoming attached to old realities. So what fear does is it gets people to relive these old realities inside new moments. By having this flushing going on constantly through acknowledgement, you enter the realm of freshness, and you are in freshness because it allows that life to become present again, and you breathe again. And it is this that gives you a fresh perspective. So staying in what you shared, Ashaji, and I don't expect you to respond, what you shared about someone that you really love so much, just absolutely not talking to you, and reliving the experience of that, you're carrying that into new moments. And that prevents you from the freshness of everywhere else where you are so cared for and so supported and so loved and so blessed. So sometimes to activate freshness as a transmutation of fear, you may want to bring in the stillness breath. Get that reconnection to breathing again. Breathe in and have a long breath out, where the breath out is at least 2 times, possibly even 3 times the length, the duration of the breath in. And with every breath out, every moment of that breath out, visualize yourself coming into your body. Anything that's not real sucks out your life force. So you get more and more and more disconnected from your body. By doing the stillness breath, breathing in and a long breath out, you re-enter your body. And freshness returns, giving rise to a fresh, new perspective. I had a situation when this is after my spiritual awakening and after my mother passed away. Many of you have heard me talk about the little bit of strain with my relationship with my father. And then towards the last stretch of his journey, and after my mother passed, it's like he just didn't want to speak to me. And I don't know what else was going on in his head, but I was in this realm of, you know, uh, it can't be right that I'm the firstborn and my father doesn't want to speak to me. I can't blame him. It has something to do with me, you know? And I would recall all of those moments where my dad and I did great work together, and the laughter we shared and some of his nuances and disciplined control practices that we would laugh about as he became older, but they were very seriously implemented when we were growing up. So I would remember all of that, and anytime I would call from Bali to speak to him, he would say, "No, no, no, I don't want to speak to you. You speak to your sister." So he would just immediately give the phone off to my sister. And at one point, I managed to have him long enough. And I said, "I actually want to talk to you." And he said, "I don't have anything to say to you, but every time you talk, you just make me emotional. And that's not my life anymore. I don't need this emotion stuff." So then it was like, okay, breath out for me. I don't need to have him feel uncomfortable. It's not my place to give him a lecture on it's okay to feel your emotions. He knows where he's at. And that reconnecting to his emotions probably gets him to miss my mom a lot, and he doesn't have the desire to or the wherewithal to connect to spirituality in the way that my mother did. So it was time for me to complete my relationship with him. And I did. I acknowledged the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. I acknowledged moments that I wished to celebrate, the moments I wish to be grateful for. And declared that relationship complete. The funny thing is that when my dad, before he took his last breath, he was on the ventilator. He came out of the ventilator for a few days. And in that time, he kept asking if my son was okay. He had no interest in my son whatsoever. He would always say, "I don't even understand his English." So he kept asking everybody, "Can you check? Is Sai okay? Is Sai okay? Is Sai okay?" You know, "Tell Mynoo that I'm there. Check on Sai if he's okay." And the funny thing is, Sai and Jill, his wife, she wasn't his wife at the time. They had made a commitment to each other. They were going through a very difficult patch in their relationship. So I knew that my dad was ready to make his journey and cross over to his light. So that fresh perspective was not available to me whilst I was into, these expectations that should have been about a father-daughter relationship. The moment I was able to release that, focus on that which continues to be and will always continue to be until I take my last breath, the magic of coming from this lineage of my father, freshness started to enter my realm, and a fresh perspective enabled me to look at a very different way in which I celebrated our relationship with my father. Why is it important to have freshness as a transmutation pathway to fear? Because many humans are not responding to the present, to the moment. They are reacting to memory. Freshness interrupts inherited emotional momentum. When there is an energy signature out there, where most of the energy around, in the context of humans is reacting to memory, freshness interrupts that inherited emotional momentum. You're not impacted by that energy signature. And that flicks the switch up on for you to connect to miracles. And miracles enter your realm. And that's when expecting and accepting miracles becomes your norm. Who is this for? Who is this transmutation for? It is for those that are stuck in old heartbreaks. Heartbreaks are not just about a lover or an intimate relationship. It's also about friendships. Heartbreaks exist around business, around loss of identity. It's for those who are repeating old business collapses, for those who are expecting betrayal before connection, for those who are entering tomorrow carrying yesterday's emotional residue. The more aware you become, we do this unbeknown to us, carry yesterday's emotional residue. And that's why, for me, the end of the day is a very important time. When I go into the end of the day, and right now I'm continuing to use my accomplishment audit, which is the age of brilliance time. So a lot of the time that, at least one of the acknowledgements of accomplishment is to do with any emotions that I might have completely neutralized or dissolved. So the end of day practice, whatever it is for you, get to a neutral point. Do whatever it is that you require to. How you can do this? You acknowledge the old emotional contracts. Just acknowledge. Once you've acknowledged fully, then you can, with conscious awareness, release them. I declare my relationship and all expectations that go with a daughter-father dynamic, I consciously release them. When I ended my relationship with Phil, we did a completion, consciously releasing all emotional contracts so that we were both completely free to experience the kind of life that we wanted to. It gave Phil, who had suffered a stroke, suffers from aphasia, to actually find a woman that he fell in love with and married. They've been married now for, 6 years. More than that, actually, possibly 8 years or 9 years. It just wouldn't have been possible if Phil and I hadn't completed our relationship in this way. Today is not yesterday. This moment is fresh. Every breath is a fresh breath. This possibility in this moment is fresh. Regenerative action begins only when freshness is allowed. Miracles arrive through doors that fear forgot to reopen. But if you hang on to false expectations appearing real, you keep reopening the same doors. And miracles can't enter that. We're going to stop here today, as we've come more or less towards the end of our session today, and we will continue the rest next week. If any of you have any questions or anything at all that you wish to, there's just a few seconds left. Oh, actually, we are right on time. So put into practice what I have shared and enjoy the experience of freshness and focus. When facts acknowledged there, I see vacuumed in front of me, and I feel that comes in God's plan, which is perfect. I just gladly accept and correct. I just thank you. Thank you, Ashaji. I just loved it all. Thank you so much, Ananta. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Really great to see you online. We should catch up sometime soon. Thank you, everyone. I declare our session complete. Namaste.
Thank you, Mynoo ji. Thank you.
Thank you.